Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Peace Talks. This is normally the series where we catch up with the musicians and artists that are going to come and play for us at the Mars Bar. But this is a mini series that we're doing for the Jazz Central Mentoring Program. So this is a program now in its second year. It was headed up by Arnie Somogyi, the jazz bassist and also a teacher at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. And also with Phil Rose, who represents Jazz Midlands and Birmingham Jazz. And the program basically takes a number of emerging musicians from the Midlands and pairs them up with a mentor, an established artist in the jazz scene in the UK. And through that program, they develop a project. All of those projects, there's six mentees that have gone through this year. All of those projects will be presented in a three-day festival in Birmingham. We'll come on to that later on at 1000 Trades. And then each of the projects is going to be presented at another venue throughout the West Midlands. So today, we are joined by the trumpeter, James Borland. Hi, James. Thanks for joining us
Hi,
today.
Dave. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And you've been teamed up with George Crowley as your mentor in this program.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So let's start with yourself then, a bit about yourself, your sort of musical journey so far. Do you mind me asking how old you are at the moment?
That's fine. Yeah, I'm 25.
Excellent. So in 25 years on this planet, how did you get to become a musician? Let's explore that a little.
Yeah, I guess for me, my family's super supportive of music. My dad played music when he was young, and his parents really loved music. And he actually always says it skipped a generation because he was sort of forced into it because
Okay.
they loved it so much, and therefore he sort of he said he saw it as a big rebellion when he didn't do A-level music. Whereas for me and my brothers, we all really fell in love with music. So they were super supportive, but not too pushy. So from like a quite a young age, I heard just lots of different music from my parents, and not in a sort of like a studied like that they were professional musicians way, just in a way of they love lots of different kinds of music. So heard lots of different stuff. And I wanted to play the trumpet from like a very, very young age, which was quite unusual, but couldn't start until I was a bit older. But I always think it's because I remember my mom watching the film High Society, which has
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Louis Armstrong
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in, but she loves Bing Crosby. And but my younger brother would argue, we were talking the other day, he thinks it's more because of the Aristocats, the Disney film. So, but yeah, I wanted to play the trumpet from when I was very young. And then in year four in primary school, I got to start playing. And I've got an older brother who's also a jazz musician. He's 4 years older. So when I started the trumpet, he was old enough that he was playing some jazz, and we're both from Birmingham, and he was doing different stuff in the city. So I was, as he was studying with different people, I was hearing all the stuff he was being told to
Yeah.
listen to. And then he would tell me about stuff, but obviously it's your older brother, so you don't really listen to him. But eventually, my grandpa bought me a CD of Clifford Brown and Max Roach, and that really, really got me into jazz music. Clifford Brown's my favorite trumpet player. But
Yeah.
I think my grandpa bought me the CD, and it really connected more than other things I'd listened to. And I was probably like 13, and then I did loads of stuff in my local music service. And then when I was 16, my parents told me to go for the junior conservatoire. So I started having lessons at the juniors in Birmingham.
Hmm.
And then I did my undergrad also at the Birmingham Conservatoire. So yeah, had a really always been really supported with music. My both sides of my family love music, so it was super easy to get into. There was never a judgment of
Right. Yeah, yeah.
you should do this instead. If anything, my parents were more pushy, well, not even pushy, they were more supportive of music than they were of more academic things because they could just
Brilliant.
see it was what we wanted to do.
Yeah, that's great. I'm interested to kind of get your views on what it's like, sort of emerging um, out of the studies and your learning and such into the world of professional music now in the 2020s. 100 years on from jazz starting, but in a world of very different, I suppose, from where your parents or your grandparents would have been, playing and such. There's a lot of technology and avenues, I suppose, that are open to people, wanting to be creative, especially in music and such. Um, and channels for you to get to people that you may not have been able to reach previously. But I kind of like to get your take on kind of how that has helped, and both helped and hindered your own sort of personal development as a musician, and sort of towards income, and actually making a living out of what you're doing. Any kind of thoughts or ideas on that?
Yeah, I guess you can only relate it to what you've heard about pre-social media times. And I hear stuff about certain people who were my tutors or mentors, where people coming up in jazz in the 90s and early 2000s, and when the country in general is in a better economic way, it means people want to hear live music more. And if people want to hear live music more and pay for it, you can then play live music more. And if you can play live music more, that's jazz, you're going to get better at playing jazz. And if your rent's cheaper, it all sort of adds up together, I guess. But I'd say for now, in terms of particularly social media, I'm someone who I'm not like a whiz with it by any mean, but I kind of enjoy it. I like cutting out little clips, putting it up, but it can feel kind of, if I'm honest, it can totally feel like putting stuff into the void. But I'm not someone who gets too sort of caught up in that, because if it does something, it's worth it. Like, you just put yourself out there, and it makes you more easily reachable, because it's like, as a musician, all the time you'll get messages from someone you've never met based on a
Mm,
recommendation. And if they can Google your name and your Instagram comes up, and your Instagram actually has clips that are high enough quality, people are going to be like, cool. Whereas if they Google your name and it just comes up with a photo or whatever, it's not so
yeah.
helpful. But I guess yeah, in terms of social media, I had a funny one earlier this year where I had a gig for my quartet that will be doing the performances in September. But I had a gig at the Spotted Dog, and I always push my gigs, but it can always feel a bit like, I think most of my friends, most of the musicians in the scene know that you're playing there anyway. And then the other people that come to the Spotted Dog don't necessarily come based on who's playing anyway. So
Mm,
the
yeah.
promotion can feel not necessarily that important. But anyway, I like filmed a video in portrait rather than landscape, and
Yeah.
specifically just to sort of plug the gig, but hadn't really put any thought into it. And then that ended up being my most liked post and most viewed post, and liked by, when you look at the statistics, like about 60% were people that didn't follow me. But of course, what's funny about that is that that wasn't then the busiest gig I've ever done. It doesn't
Yeah.
really translate. It's like, just because the post did well, I think it was more to do with the fact that it's shot in portrait, and the fact that like the angle was kind of interesting because it was on the fisheye
Mm,
and we're wearing different colors. I think it's probably as simple as that, rather than, it doesn't necessarily speak to the merit of your music. But again, I don't have a problem with that personally. Some people have a bit of a chip on their shoulder about it, but I think for me, I think technology, definitely the pros outweigh the cons, where you can make yourself more visible, you can you can release your music more easily than ever, you can reach out to people you want to play with more easily than ever. It's like there's always been difficulties with that stuff, but now if you wanted to, you can record something on your phone, you can put it on Bandcamp and try and make money from it if you want to. It's just your
mm,
choice of whether that's a high quality enough product. Whereas of course, back 20 years ago, you couldn't do that.
yeah. Yeah. I think it's I suppose back, if you go back to sort of the 80s, it was you put something on tape, and then you'd have to copy tapes and hand those out to your mates, sort of thing. So the
Yeah,
the facilities to distribute stuff that you produced is there. Obviously, when you start getting onto the bigger platforms and such like that, it's it's enabling you to sort of monetize that is very much more challenging, I suppose, now. I think
definitely. Yeah.
the idea of sort of recorded music, And people kind of expect everything for free, don't they, these days? You know,
Mm.
they expect to be able to listen to music for free. They expect free gigs and stuff like that.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and I think my thoughts are that the sort of technology has kind of encouraged that more than anything, and
Mm.
perhaps devalued music. So that's why, you know, we were both at Cherry Reds last night. That's why I love being in
Yeah,
a room that's
yeah, yeah,
packed with people that are, you know, paid a tenner each on the door, and are sitting down and enjoying some great music. And it's that
yeah.
that experience of a band playing and also the audience together that you kind of lose when it becomes sort of, you know, a one-to-one interaction. You know, someone watching something on social media or something, you get some of the feedback through the likes and you know, the engagement with the posts and stuff that you do. But I think there's nothing better than
It's
being
not the same. Yeah.
that sort of physical thing. No, that's great. So talking about bands and the live experience, let's talk a bit about the project that you've been working on with your mentor, and through this project. Looking back and moving forward is the title. Do you want to sort of tell us a little bit about what it's about and how it came about?
Yeah, I generally, I'm not super thematic like composer, and I think it's because I'm not I've never been a writer in terms of like stories or in terms of like with words rather than music. Whereas with composition, it's always come fairly easily to me and it's fairly natural. I do spend time working on it, trying to introduce new stuff, but a lot of my music I've written that's been the strongest for me has always come out very easily. And I guess the title was just to be honest, it was that Arnie was looking for a title for it, and I sort of described the music, and he suggested it, and I thought it
Okay.
fit well. Where for me, the when I got the mentorship, I was so happy and was really looking forward to working on composition, and my sort of academic brain of going to university said like, oh, so I'll write some really like challenging stuff, and it'll all be really difficult and I'll be really pushing myself and da 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 da. And then eventually, once I started writing, I realized the stuff I enjoyed most was more melodic and was
Mhm.
more simplistic in some ways, but not necessarily simple, just not overly complex, or it had come, it might have been complex, but it came naturally. I didn't have to do any sort of music maths to work it out. It just sort of came to me, whether I sang it or played it on trumpet or played it on guitar or piano to write it. It's always different, but this music's come out pretty naturally, and the title basically is referring to I started looking back to all the music I loved and thinking about why that connects me to jazz music, and then thinking at how that can affect my own compositions rather than I
Right.
think sometimes there can be an aim to look forwards and to find something new, but without looking at what influenced you, it can be, at least for me, from my experience, it can be a little bit aimless. So I sort of started thinking, well, what's the stuff that really got me into this music? And then thinking after that, what's the stuff I really connect with now and where are the sort of through lines? So I love the Miles Davis second quintet. And then
Hmm.
over the past year, I've gotten more and more into both of the Marsalis brothers, but particularly Branford Marsalis, and thinking about how, well, of course I'm into that because they're obviously so influenced by the second quintet. And I kind of went back from more modern musicians who I'm very inspired by. So I really love the young saxophone player Emmanuel Wilkins, American,
Hmm.
and then the trumpet player Ambrose Akinmusor. And I kind of
Right.
realized, well, actually, as much as their music sounds so modern, that's often more due to their improvising. The pure compositions are super melodic and they're super they feel more emotional rather than the complexity comes in by how incredible the musicians are without necessarily being there on the page. The page might be the simplest thing, what they're reading,
Yeah.
but what they actually end up playing is really, really inspiring and really interesting and new. And I guess that was it. I picked my band for a reason, because I like playing with them so much, and I know they have great ideas themselves. And whilst I could have written all the music to have very specific piano parts or very specific drum parts, I think a lot of my music sort of has a melody and then some form of hits or some sort of riff underneath it.
Mhm.
And by it being something that's easily catchable, it means that once you're in the improv, you can ignore it or you can go back to it and everyone can sort of play off of that. That ideally for me in music, I'm all about listening to each other and listening to yourself and trying to improvise that way. And I guess that's why George fits so well, George Crowley, where I'd
Mm.
heard George play various times in Birmingham on such like widely different projects. And I just knew that he'd be able to slot in to whatever music I wrote really well. And he's had such great ideas with it. And what's been great with George is that when he does have the ideas, it's not you should do this, it's why don't you try this or this or this. It's the fact that there's a plethora of different ideas you can do. There's not one right or wrong. And also
Right.
looking at what we've been looking at more recently now that I'm coming to having all the music written is like whilst we used to play this tune this way, now that the set's fully formed, is that the way it should still be? And then also, what do you
Okay.
leave? What do you leave for in the moment, and what do you sort of pre-plan? Because we had a funny moment talking about the gig I did at the Spotted Dog. I filmed from a couple of angles, and one of my favorite moments was a totally improvised moment. And I was talking to George about how it's funny that it's hard to sort of post that on social media, going back to that, and acknowledge it without sort of bigging yourself up, because
Mhm.
that it's not like a sort of super complex thing, but the fact that it happened in the moment
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
make it more interesting, if you see what I mean. It
Yeah.
was that we were going between one of my compositions and a Thelonious Monk tune, and Nick, my piano player, brought it in a way that none of us expected, to the point where the Thelonious Monk tune, we were playing it in a different time signature to what it should have been, but no one freaked out. It's
Right.
that we all used our
Just came
ears and
about. Yeah.
followed it. Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, that's why I've got those guys in the band. Like Nick Mans is an amazing young piano player, and then Ben Love is a really great bass player. Who Nick's super active, and Ben's a really great anchor. He's really good at listening and sort of following what's going on and finding what fits in. And then Kai Terenzi on drums, I've played with for years and years, and Kai's similar to George in a way, is super, super versatile, and
Yeah.
he can swing really hard if it needs to, but he also plays totally free music and he plays groovier music. So Kai will that I can offer what I think he should do, and he'll always do something better, if you see what I
Mhm.
mean. It's like
Yeah.
he always knows what I'm thinking.
Excellent. So, great introduction to the band there as well. What would you say that you sort of benefited? How's the mentoring program, specifically the Jazz Central mentoring, helped in sort of the project that you developed, and your own sort of personal development as a musician?
Yeah, with George has been so great. I've had lots of time spent with him, and in different ways. I've gone to his practice space a few times, and we played through the compositions I've got, just sort of duo, so trumpet and saxophone with a metronome, and just playing with him is so great. Like playing with such a incredible horn player, and working out what we can do on the performance, how we can play together, different things is great. But as I was kind of saying earlier, George is great with he's constantly suggesting different things, but they don't
Mhm.
necessarily come with a sort of prejudgment. It's the fact that the music can be so many different things, and finding, I guess you often when it's right with the music, when it's something really, really good, and you're super happy with it, whether that be the composition or the choice. But George from the start has just been super easy to get in touch with and super sort of generous with his information, whether it be about promoters or about the industry. And he's someone who more recent times has only worked, well, I shouldn't say only, but has worked as a sideman
Right.
mostly.
Yeah.
And but to like a very high level with like lots and lots of different people. But so he's sort of given me his advice as a band leader, but acknowledged that he hasn't done it in recent times. So he's asked his peers and stuff like that, because that's always changing. Where I think you've said it as well, Dave, in one of the meetings, that now promoters are often looking for live video, which is why I got
Mm.
this gig at the Dog a few months ago, so I could record it. And it meant that I'd got various different live videos for different sort of feelings, and it
Yeah.
shows off the music and the band in a different way. And George said the same, whereas when George promoted his last album, it was all about, which I've seen all of these on YouTube from when I was in college, that people would do the thing where there's video of them in the studio recording the album, and then there's video of them talking in the studio whilst it's
Mm.
playing in the background. Whereas I think that's sort of gone now, which, if I'm honest, I think is maybe a good thing. I always found it a bit strange because I understand the live thing. Promoters want to see the band live and see if they're actually good and how an
Yeah,
audience reacts and
it's
how.
the audience as well that want to see that. You know,
Yeah,
asking someone to come to a gig, you want that vibe that you're connecting with the audience, and you know,
that's it.
rather than you're sort of, you know, you're sitting in the studio with headphones on and baffles over
Yeah,
the mics and
exactly.
stuff like that. You know,
But I
so,
guess the mentorship in general as well. I in the past have done lots of sort of co-led projects and really enjoyed doing that. But I kind of realized when I was applying for this that I'd definitely been a I can't think of the word right now, but it had been something I'd done to myself, I think, to avoid putting myself out there myself.
right,
I think
okay,
there'd been a certain part of me like always going for something a bit more co-led because I didn't want to be like, this is my band. Whereas with this group, again, with the looking backwards thing, it's the James Borland Quartet
yeah,
with George Crowley, because we're a quartet and George is our guest and my mentor,
mm,
and it'll be
yeah,
really amazing to have him. But the band continues after the mentorship, if you see what I mean. We won't replace George. It's that
right,
the quartet is the band,
yeah,
and George for these two gigs will be an incredible addition, and hopefully more in the future. But the band itself as a unit is the four of us, and that's what we've done since January. As we were playing probably about once every 2 weeks if we could fit it in Nick's living room. So
fantastic.
yeah,
So, but moving smooth onto the gigs. So your first performance of this will be at the Jazz Central Mentoring Festival at 1000 Trades in the Birmingham Jewellery Quarter. So that's on Saturday, the 7th of
exactly.
September. The festival itself, for those watching, is running from Friday the 6th through to Sunday the 8th.
Yeah,
Uh, I'll be down there for all of that. I'll be on filming duty, I
great.
believe.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant.
and then you're playing also, I believe, the jazz at the Corn Exchange in Ross on Wye
Exactly. Yeah,
on Thursday, the 12th of September.
yeah.
Excellent. So those are two opportunities for our viewers in the West
Mhm.
Midlands to catch this wonderful project. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing that. I'll definitely be down at the say at the Thousand Trades. I may get down to the Corn Exchange. I've been there a couple of times before, so I might get down there. But it's a Thursday that's not one of my gigs, so I might be able to get down there. But really looking forward to hearing that. Thanks so much for your time today, James. It's been great chatting with you, and
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
I'll
Great to
see
chat
you
to you.
in Birmingham soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Take care.